Hello folks, welcome to another Baker Bit. Today I'm going to talk to you about pre-tied leaders for one poling. Why do you need a leader when you're one poling, you ask? Well, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked me that. There are a number of reasons why you want to use a leader when you're one poling. To begin with, I'm a braid guy. I use braid just about on every occasion. There are some exceptions to that, and you'll ask me, well, what braid do you use? I use this spider wire Invisibraid. It's ultracast Invisibraid, 15 pound, and it has the diameter of 4-pound test line. So if you're using straight mono or fluorocarbon, this video probably isn't of any benefit to you. But if you're a braid guy, there are occasions when you need a leader that's either fluorocarbon or mono. I personally prefer fluorocarbon. I usually use clear, P-line, or any other good fluorocarbon line. I usually implement a leader when I'm fishing with a jig that is so lightweight that I need some extra weight to get it down to the fish and get it down in a pretty quick manner. With the advent of live scope, people are targeting fish, and when you see a fish, you want to try to get your bait on it as quick as you can. Those fish move around. If the fish aren't finicky and you can get away with a heavier bait, then there's no need for a leader. Typically, my rule of thumb is if the bait is 1/16 of an ounce or lighter, I will use a weight above it to try to get that bait down to the fish quicker. Of course, there are exceptions to that rule. I mean, if you're fishing in real shallow water and a 1/16 ounce bait or even a 32nd ounce bait will get down to the fish quick enough, there's no need for extra weight. But if you're fishing 10, 15 feet deep and you've got a 1/32 ounce bait, it seems like it takes forever for that bait to get down to the fish. So I'll usually put a weight above it. And when I do that, I'll use a leader, and I'll use a fluorocarbon leader. So why do I use a fluorocarbon or mono leader just because I'm putting an extra weight up above my bait? Well, I can tell you in my experience, if you use braid and you've got your bait tied on at the end of your braid line, and you go above that bait and you put a heavier weight directly on the braid and peg it or tie it or however you secure that heavier weight above the bait directly on the braid, what happens to me is a lot of times when you swing on a fish or you miss a fish and your bait comes out of the water, it tangles. I don't know why it is, but if you've got braid below that weight and above that weight, it just seems to tangle up a lot and have a devil of a time trying to untangle it. That braid's small, it ties in knots, and so you're cutting it off, you got to redo your weight. And I have found that if you have a fluorocarbon leader or mono leader below that weight and then your braid above that weight, whenever that happens and it gets tangled up, it's still going to tangle on occasion when you jerk it out. But with that mono or fluorocarbon below the weight and the braid above, when it tangles, it's easy to get undone. It doesn't tie up like it does when you've got braid below and above the weight. So that's one of the primary reasons I use these rigs if I have a weight up above the bait. It keeps it from tangling. Of course, there are other reasons. So in those situations, what I want is I want my small bait on the bottom of a piece of fluorocarbon, and then I tie either a crane swivel or barrel swivel or a split ring to the upper end of it, so that I've got just about a 10 to 12 inch leader. I don't know if you can see that or not. That's awful small, but that's my pre-tied rig. It's just a 10 to 12 inch piece of fluorocarbon with the bait on one end and a split ring or a swivel, whichever you prefer, on the other end. And then I'll tie my braid straight to that swivel or split ring, and I'll have the weight above it. So what I end up with is, here's my braid coming off my reel. Before I tie my braid onto the leader, of course, I'll slide and I use a barrel weight. I like to use water gremlin weights that you can buy at Walmart or Academy Sports. It seems like they're a little bit smaller in diameter. Here is just a picture of a package of water gremlin barrel weights that I buy from Walmart. This is a size 1/8. There's 14 to a package. I think they're 99 cents. So they're real cheap. A lot of people like to use tungsten because tungsten is sometimes smaller in size, but frankly, I've compared the size of these water gremlins to tungsten, and they're not that much different. Here's a pack of 1/4 ounce weights, water gremlin weights. You get 11 in a pack, again 99 cents at Walmart. The tungsten weights, you get 3 1/4 ounce tungsten weights for about $5. So I mean, you can tell the difference, and frankly, I've compared the size of these 1/4 ounce water gremlins to the tungsten, and I don't see an appreciable difference, certainly not for the price difference. As far as my barrel swivel, I typically use a size 7. I want to use as small a swivel as I can. Split ring, if you prefer to use a split ring, I found that a size 3 is a good size for that use. Another advantage to using this rig, in addition to having a heavier weight that will allow your jig to get down to the fish better, is that if you're using live scope, you now have multiple objects that the live scope will pick up. You'll see your bait, but this weight's bigger, especially if you're using like a little 1/64 ounce jig. Sometimes that's hard to pick up on live scope, but you can certainly pick up this weight above it, and so it makes it easier to find your rig on live scope. Another reason to use a leader with mono or fluorocarbon is visibility. Sometimes I'll find a situation where I think the fish are a little line shy of my braided line. I think braid makes a little more noise going through the water, a little more resistance than does fluorocarbon. And so if the fish seem to be a little spooky, this leader with a mono or a fluorocarbon line seems to not spook the fish nearly as bad. If I'm at Truman, I don't think the visibility of the braid is a problem really. Usually that water's pretty dirty if you've got 3 or 4 inches of visibility. So I don't think the necessity to use fluorocarbon for visibility is an issue. But there are other lakes and other times when it certainly is. When I'm at Truman, I'll use a fairly heavy fluorocarbon line, 10, 12, because like I say, I don't think the fish spook due to the line size. Now, if I'm on Lake of the Ozarks and that water's 6, 8 feet visibility, very clear, then I think the fluorocarbon line is a factor. I think the fish will spook from that at times, and so I'll even downsize my fluorocarbon and I'll go down to 6 pound. I was fishing in a tournament on Table Rock Lake, and the visibility in that lake was unbelievable. I don't know how far you could see forever, it seemed like. I'd go down to 4 pound clear fluorocarbon line, and that seemed to help. I like to use braid because I like the sensitivity of it. But now if I think this braid even above a leader like this is spooking the fish, and just a 10 to 12 inch leader is not curing the problem, I'll go to straight fluorocarbon on my reel, and then I'll put my weight straight on the line coming from the reel, and I'll peg that sinker. I don't peg my sinkers on this rig because the leader's so short. I find that when I toss this out, I don't have a problem with that weight running up the line as I'm casting it. Some people do like to peg them, and if you do, it's real simple. Before you put your weight on, you can use just a bobber stop above the weight on the fluorocarbon to hold it in place. This is just a pack of bobber stops I picked up at Academy Sports, but just any kind of bobber stop will work. Got these kind that you typically see. You can use the cloth kind, any kind of work. So if you want to use a bobber stop, before you tie your braid onto your swivel or split ring, whatever you're using, and before you put your weight on the braid, run you a bobber stop up on the braid, and then just pull that up, and then take your braid, run it through your weight, and then tie it onto your swivel or split ring, and then you can just take that bobber stop down, pull it down to the weight, and that'll peg it. And then when you're casting, your weight certainly won't move. Like I say, I haven't had a problem with that. Another method to do that real easy is instead of a bobber stop, you can use, I used to use these when I was bass fishing. They're just called peggets. They're a rubber peg that you can put in the weight, cinch it down tight, and then clip the ends. So you just take one of these plastic pegs, and you just go in either from the top or the bottom and stick it down the center shaft of the weight, and you pull that peg down tight. Take you some clippers and clip that off, and then that'll peg that weight, but you can move it, slide it up and down, and that keeps from pinching the line. That rubber won't harm the line. So that's a couple of methods to peg that. So I pre-tie a lot of these rigs, and I store them on these same popsicle sticks that I use to store my spider rig rigs. And I did a Baker bit, I think it was Baker bit number 8, where I explained to you how I make these little popsicle sticks and how I use them for my pre-tied spider rigs. And I'll put a link to that video at the end of this one if you want to watch that, and I'll show you how I cut these and make these. But you use them the same way. You just take your popsicle stick, take your pre-tied rig, take your split ring or your swivel, whichever you're using, and put it in the slot right at the top, and then you just wrap the line around and bring that down. Take your rubber band, put it on the hook, pull that rubber band down and around and loop that on the other end, and then you've got a pre-tied rig. That's the easy way to store them. You're out fishing and you break off, and then you just simply cut the what's left of your rig off of the braid. Grab you one of these pre-tied rigs, unwrap it, take your rubber band off your deal, and there you go. You're ready to just tie this on again. Slide your weight up the braid, tie that on, and you're ready to go. I like to pre-tie these things if I'm going to be fishing a tournament and I've got a pretty good idea of what baits I might be using. I'll pre-tie a few of these the night before. It's quicker. Then I'm not sitting out in the boat and I'm not having to tie my fluorocarbon to my braid and do the whole rig out there in the middle of a tournament. It's also real handy this time of the year when it's 30 degrees outside and your fingers are numb and you can't hardly tie a knot to begin with. So you only have to tie one knot when you've pre-tied these things. And so there again, I'll show you, I'm going to put it back together. I'll just put that split ring behind one side of the popsicle stick, wrap it up, put the rubber band on it, bring the rubber band down and hook it in the other end, and there you go. Now I've got a box put together, a plain old 3700 box that I use for nothing but this to make these rigs and to store these rigs in the boat. And I'll try to get the camera up and point down on this and just show you how I've got mine set up. You can set yours up however you want. Before I show you my box set up here, I probably should mention that there are times when, like this is a 1/64 ounce jig. It falls really, really slow. And so if you've got a 1/8 or 1/4 ounce sinker above it and you toss that in, that sinker falls and that jig falls above it, and then it seems like it takes forever for that jig to get down in a vertical position. So what I'll do in situations like that is I'll actually take a split shot of various size, depending on how heavy a weight I'm using up here. If I'm using a 1/4, I'll put a bigger split shot down here to try to get that down, because that 1/4 is going to fall real quick. If I'm using a lighter like a 1/8 up here, then I'll use a smaller split shot there because this jig won't trail as far behind it. But so you'll see in my box I keep a number of different sizes of split shot, because I may actually put a piece of split shot right on that fluorocarbon above the jig head. As far as the weight size above the leader, I will typically try to use as heavy a weight as I can get away with if it doesn't seem to be bothering the fish. That way it gets it down to the fish quicker. I will say I typically only use either an 1/8 or a 1/4. I don't go much heavier than a 1/4, although some people use a 1/2, whatever, depending on how deep you are and how quick you want to get that weight down there. But I've got my box set up with 1/8 and 1/4 barrel sinkers, or egg sinkers I guess they are, to use, and that's what I typically use. So let's take a look at the box. Okay, so this is how I have my box set up. On this side I actually have some little rattling beads. I hate to give away all my secrets, but sometimes I might put a little rattling bead between the swivel and the sinker, and as you jiggle it a little bit, it'll create a little rattle, which may mimic a shad sound. Then I've got these in the next compartment. I've just got my little 1/8 ounce egg sinker. Next one's a quarter ounce egg sinker. And then I've got my rubber bands to tie my jigs to my popsicle stick. Over here I've just got my bobber stoppers in case I want to use those. In this compartment I have my little split rings, which I typically, frankly, prefer a swivel. It just seems like they're easier to tie and manage. It seems like the line and the knot always get between the rings and these split rings. Some people really prefer these. I like frankly, I like the crane swivels the best. Seems like they've got less to hang up on. But I've got both in here. I've got crane and barrel swivels, frankly, just because that's what I've bought. And then I've got split shot, like I say, of various sizes, all the way down to very, very, very small split shot, just depending on what the situation is. I keep a bunch of pre-tied rigs in here of some colors that I typically use. Like I say, if you have an idea what you're going to be using in a tournament or going out on a certain lake, you can pre-tie those up. These are just all pre-tied rigs. Over here, I keep popsicle sticks that are unused in case I need those, or if I'm sitting at home at night before I'm going out, then I've got them there. I just pull this box out and I can tie up a bunch of rigs. Here's some of those plastic pegs that I was telling you about, and that pretty much is my box. I typically tie a leader that, like I say, is about 12 inches long. I use my box as a guide. This box is 14 inches from edge to edge, so if I go from about compartment to compartment, or I guess from this compartment to this edge is right at 11 to 12 inches, and so I can just use that as a measuring guide, and that distance also works well when putting them on these popsicle sticks. It allows you to put the swivel at one end, wrap the line around, and come all the way back around the top again, and have the jig here in the body of the popsicle stick so that you can put the rubber band on it. Okay, so that's pretty much my setup for my pre-tied rigs that I use for one poling, and why I use them, and how I implement them and tie them and store them. I tried to answer all your questions that I could think of. I'm sure you have questions. One thing I didn't cover, people will ask me. I always forget something, and that's fine. Go to the comments below and ask me whatever question you might have. I try to read all those and answer those. But people will probably ask, well, what kind of knot do you use to tie the fluoro to the jig? I use a Palomar knot. I just prefer that so I can cinch it down and then have that jig stay in a horizontal position. Some people like a loop knot. It's whatever your preference is. On the other end, on the swivel or the split ring, I just use a Palomar knot. It's easy to tie, it's strong, and then when I'm tying my braid to the swivel on the other end, I use a trilene knot. It's just an easy knot. It's strong. I've never had a knot fail. If you want to know how to tie those knots, go to YouTube. There's a ton of videos that'll tell you how to tie any knot in existence, and so I'm not going to do that. But I can't think of anything else. I hope I've explained everything and why I use it and under what conditions. If you have questions, be sure and put them in the comments below, and I'll try to answer them. As always, if you like the video, I hope you will subscribe. Here's something I just learned I didn't know. Even if you subscribe, if you don't hit that notification bell next to the subscription button, you will not be notified of new videos as they come out. So if you want to get a notice of when more videos come out, not only do you need to hit the subscribe button, but hit that notification bell next to it that pops up there when you hit the subscribe button. Also, if you liked it, please hit the thumbs up down below the video and above the description. That's the like button, and that'll help me out and help the channel out. So thanks for being with me. I hope you learned a little bit or got something that will help you out in the future.